you very much. Good evening, everyone. It's a great honor and great pleasure to me to be hosted by this platform. Um, China-India relations is what I focus on in my academic career, in my research. However, today I would like to talk about them in a little bit broader perspective, as it was already said in this very kind introduction. Um, I have to stress, well, it's not a secret that I'm neither Chinese nor Indian. So I'm looking at China-India relations from a distance, certain distance, from a European perspective, which sometimes is a challenge, but sometimes I feel it can be advantageous, as at least this distance gives you a broader perspective, and maybe sometimes you don't get that much emotional, for example, because this is not your own motherland. However, without further delays, I would like to share my presentation with you. All right, so my presentation will actually be divided into two parts. In the first part, I would like to focus on the regional implications of the China-India dispute. And within this part, I would like to briefly refer to three selected issues, to the border issue itself per se, to the water issue, and to the Tibetan issue in the political perspective. Afterwards, I would like to proceed to the global implications of the China-India border dispute in the light of the China-US rivalry. So in the light of the very, very hot topic, which certainly has impact on all of us, and which is becoming more and more significant to India itself too, since we know that very well, the relationship between India and the US is getting closer as well. But I will talk about it a little bit later. So to start with the border issue, I believe we have many experts, bigger experts than myself on India's internal policy, Indian history. So I will just refer briefly to the China-India border dispute per se. We know that it hasn't been resolved for over 70 years, and actually it's rooted much further back into the past, because it stems from old colonial times, as it is the moment when it was born and it wasn't resolved. As a result, we still have it today, and it seems it is increasing because the border tensions seem to increase. What is sad, and what we have to remember about, is that China does not really want to solve this dispute. There were some proposals from the Chinese in the past, proposals which India refused to accept when it comes to the division of some and sharing some territories, disputed territories. However, right now it seems that even though China declares that, well, the China-India border dispute should be kind of set aside so that the China-India relations in different spheres could flourish, in fact, it seems that Beijing is not really interested in solving this dispute, because it can always be used for the so-called blackmailing practice. And I will actually refer to this blackmailing practice a few times in my presentation, because not just the border itself is used for the blackmailing practice. What I mean by blackmailing practice, I mean that China can always use the border issue, can increase tensions, can heat up the atmosphere if it wants to pressure other countries. Well, in this regard, we're talking about India. So pressure India to doing something in different spheres when it comes to economic relations or maybe some other political issues. So in 1988, we had a consensus between China and India, between two prime ministers of those countries, that China-India relations should be developed despite of the ongoing border dispute, so that we should put the border dispute aside and develop bilateral relations. However, in reality, we know that everything is tightly connected, and that the China-India border dispute cannot be separated from economic relations, social relations, and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, China can pressure India in that regard by using the border issue card, so to speak. An example was given to us in 2017 by the Doklam standoff, which was resolved surprisingly 1 week before the prestigious BRICS summit, which was organized at that time in China. But what was kind of not really seen by particularly the international community is that India was in a way punished by China. At least this is how many experts and think tank analysts see it, perceive it, because these two matters do not really seem to be directly connected. Yet they are, or at least this is what many experts claim. I'm talking about the water issue, and in this regard, I'm talking about the Brahmaputra flood, which followed the Doklam crisis. So the thing is that China, even though it should warn India about the upcoming flood, according to the agreement between those two governments, it did not warn India about the upcoming flood on the Brahmaputra River. India, of course, accused China of doing that on purpose. China defended itself by saying that, well, some hydrological stations were being upgraded at that time, which means China could not simply share any data with India. Of course, one might say that this is possible. This might be a coincidence. However, if you look at China towards river sharing, the river flow, you will see that there is a pattern. And China is slowly using or starting to use the river issue or the water issue as another card it can play against various countries, including India. The thing is that geography gives China big advantage. China or Beijing controls Tibet, and as we can easily see in this map, Tibet is a source of life pretty much, because most of the most important rivers of South and Southeast Asia flow out from Tibet, including Indus, Ganges, Brahmaputra. So here we are talking about South Asia, including India. To sum up, or if you consider all these countries together, we are talking about almost 50% of the global population. So you can see that this is a pretty big number. And we have to remember, we are living in the times of the climate change, of the global warming. Before we started that meeting, we were talking about huge rains in Mumbai. We also referred to huge rains in Germany and Belgium, right? So these are all results of the climate change and global warming that we are facing. And by the way, again, we are talking about water, right? Well, in those cases, we are talking about having too much water falling from the sky. But the thing is that we're also facing droughts, increasing droughts, and the fact that in the future, some millions of people might actually be dying because of lack of access to drinkable water. So how is it connected in a strategic and political sense? The thing is that China is building lots of river dams on those rivers which flow from Tibet. These dams serve as power plants, so they produce energy, which China, as such a rapidly developing country, is very hungry for, and it is pretty much understandable that it needs the kind of energy. However, the problem for all those countries down the stream is that China can easily stop the river flow, it can divert water, it can store water, which means level can drop down the stream. That happened, for example, in January this year when it comes to Southeast Asia. It was the water level on Mekong River dropped by 1 meter. You might say 1 meter, it's not a big deal. However, for river transportation, for access to drinkable water, for farming livelihood, it is a disaster. The thing is that China right now, and I'm going back to the context of India, right now China is building, as it is, well, it's supposed to be the biggest river dam on the Brahmaputra River, which means that China will be able to play the very same card against India if it decides to block the river dam or just lower the water level. So in the future, in the light of the global warming, in the light of increasing droughts, India might be in the very same position, that China will be able to blackmail India by saying, okay, if you're not nice to us, if you don't accept our decisions, we will simply block the water. and what you will do with those millions of people whose life depends on this drinkable water. And the third issue I'd like to briefly refer to here is the Tibetan issue, which is, of course, a very broad matter. But here I would only like to stress that sooner or later we will have to face the election. Maybe election is not the right word, or maybe the finding, seeking for the next Dalai Lama after the current Dalai Lama passes away. I believe it will be one of the biggest challenges. It is one of the biggest upcoming challenges of China-India relations. As we all know, Tibetan community in India is a pretty important thing, including the Tibetan government in exile, and of course the fact that the current Dalai Lama, as we all know very well, lives in India. So right now, I would like to proceed to the second part of my presentation, and I would like to talk about the reaction of the international community, but particularly the reaction of the United States, and how the United States acts and how it perceives China-India relations, the challenges related to China-India relations, with particular stress on those issues that I've already been talking about. As you can see, I put a question mark here, whether it is or not the US-India alliance, because during one of my previous open lectures, we had a discussion afterwards whether we can actually talk about alliance between the US and India, or it's just a partnership. Because we know very well that India has, well, at least since the dawn of independence, has been focusing on neutrality and has claimed that it's following the non-alignment, it doesn't want to join any of the military blocs, it's looking for the third way, and so on and so forth. However, if you look at the developments of the last years, particularly at what has been happening when Narendra Modi and Donald Trump came to power in countries, we can see a significant speed up of deals and agreements signed between the United States and India. These are all very significant, strategically important, military important agreements. So, of course, during this meeting that the previous photo came from, of course, Indian representatives were very reluctant to say that even to name China. They were even avoiding the name China. They were just stressing that this is an agreement between India and the US. The representatives of the United States were much more open, and they were saying that the last agreement signed in 2020, this is against China. We have to counterbalance China, and so on and so forth. So it seems to the international community, or from the national perspective, it seems that India was left with pretty much no choice. India, if it really wants to counterbalance China in the Himalayan region and protect its own Himalayan borders, it has to find allies. And of course, the US is pretty much the only ally that can help India to create a kind of counterbalance. Even though still the government in New Delhi seems to be reluctant to talk about these things openly and to openly point finger out and show China is our enemy. So the strategy, at least the narrative, is that it is still avoiding calling China an enemy, at least openly. When it comes to the American perspective, it is pretty clear that India is perceived as the key ally for the US in the Indo-Pacific. In January 2020, just a few days before Donald Trump ceased to be American president, a very interesting document was declassified. This document did not reveal anything fantastic or surprising. However, it confirmed an interesting thing, that it is India that is the key partner for the US. And it also revealed that the US notices two continental challenges when it comes to Asia. Dispute, and the other one is the water issue. So here we have some sort of confirmation of what I have been already talking about, the fact that water will become, sooner or later, in 5, 10, 50 years, it will become the key issue or the key problem, even when it comes to China-India relations. The US has already started to do something when it comes to Mekong and when it comes to Southeast Asian countries, where it also tries to lure them back to the US and counterbalance Chinese influence in the region. Of course, whether $150 million is a big sum or not, it's a case of, well, it all depends on the context. Nevertheless, it seems that the US does perceive the water issue as one of the key challenges in the region. And who knows whether in a year, in 5 years or so, we will have a similar deal, maybe with India, as China, as I've already said, is, it's developing its water infrastructure, which might affect India in the near future. And what is the United States doing when it comes to the Tibetan issue? Here we have another bill passed by the US Congress and signed by the US President, which says that the US will put sanctions, including the denial of entry, on all Chinese officials who will try to interfere in the election of the current Dalai Lama's successor. So, yet again, we see that the United States is getting more and more interested and more engaged in the region, and that it already sees or notices problems that are already present there, but will become even more significant, even more impacting in the near future. What is important here is that these are not just hollow oral declarations. All these deals, all these agreements are on the paper. Well, of course, someone might say that this is just a piece of paper. So it all depends on the next White House and next administration, whether they will treat these pieces of paper seriously. Yet, we do have the set of laws, the set of bills. So all these agreements were passed through a legislative path, which makes it much more difficult for the Biden White House to forget about them and to deviate from the policies which were started or strengthened by President Donald Trump. However, it seems that at least when it comes to China, the attitude of the Biden White House is pretty much the same as his predecessors. So perhaps some words will be more soft, perhaps there will be fewer aggressive tweets written by President Biden himself in reference or in comparison to Donald Trump. However, the general idea will be the same, which means that China is now the biggest competitor of the United States, and that India is naturally, I mean, you don't have to be a genius to, make that kind of simple calculations. India is the key partner which United States needs on its side against China. So it seems that there is a growing US engagement in the Indo-Pacific because of the China-US rivalry. And as a consequence, India is becoming a part of this issue. Even though it seems that it is the biggest nightmare of, like politicians like Nehru coming true. I mean that back in the 1950s, even 1960s, it seems that Indian government at that time did not want the China-India border dispute to become not a local, but a continental or global challenge or issue. The biggest thing was not to make it a global issue, not to allow other countries like Soviet Union or the United States to interfere and to get involved in this matter. Now it seems that India has pretty much no other way to go. And if it really wants to protect its borders from China, it really has to turn China-India border issue to a global issue, so to speak. It is pretty much clear what the United States wants from India. However, it is not that easy to say for non-Indian and non-Chinese scholars or specialists. It's not that easy for them to say how India should react, because of course it's very easy to say what India should do if you're far away, right? If you are India, you have China just next door. And China is your neighbor from northern side, but also we have to remember about Chinese influence in the Indian Ocean and among countries of the Indian Ocean, like Sri Lanka or Maldives, for instance, which means that it is actually not like here in this picture, and this picture was drawn for one of the articles I had the pleasure to co-author for South China Morning Post. So actually, the situation I'm talking about is that this is the Indian tiger inside, and the Chinese panda should be circling India around, right? From the north and from the south. This is what I'm right now talking about. And this is the challenge India has to face. So what should India do? Should India go for an open military alliance with the United States? Should it be even more active in the Quad initiative? Or should it try to actually look for some consensus with China without allowing other countries to interfere? This is a very difficult question, and maybe we could focus on it in the Q&A session. In the last thing I would like to stress is that I would like to refer to the centennial speech of Xi Jinping when China was celebrating 100 years of the Communist Party of China, which was established in 1921. Because this actually gives us an idea what China really wants. The thing is that India does not seem to be China's priority, at least when it comes to goals and challenges of China. Of course, this speech was directed mainly at the Chinese people, so internal audience. However, there were some references and some signals to external, foreign, international audience as well, mainly to the United States, when Xi Jinping was saying that we will not allow other countries to give us some, preaching and to teach us and tell us what we should do or what we should not do and that kind of things. What I would like to say here is that logically, if, for example, Arunachal Pradesh, former Nepal, is considered to be southern part of Tibet by the Chinese, it should be, regaining Arunachal Pradesh should be a part of policy of China, of reunification of China. However, Xi Jinping did not say a word about it. He was only referring to Taiwan. He said, when he was talking about the reunification of China and to overcoming this 100 years of humiliation, which is a big, big ideological deal in China, he was talking about Taiwan, and that reuniting Taiwan with the mainland will end this process of reunification of China. He did not say anything about Arunachal Pradesh, which means that at least in China's narrative, it does not seem to be an important element. In this part, then, I think that, it at least pushes the possible China-India border conflict further into the future. What I'm going to say is that right now, it is my understanding, I might be wrong, of course, China will be focusing on Taiwan. The conflict with India, the border issue with India is somewhere there. It is a part of China's foreign policy, but it's not a priority. This is not as big the issue for China as it is for India. So the scale and the attitude of those two countries is totally different. China, it seems, will be focusing on reuniting Taiwan right now when it comes to its, China claims peaceful policy, but I think nobody here in this meeting believes that it will really be a peaceful reunification if it really, really happens. So I think that I've already gone beyond my time limit, so please, I really apologize for that. So I think China-India relations, possible China-US conflict, possible annexation of Taiwan, these are all matters which look like reading tea leaves, okay? You might say, yes, A will happen or no, B will happen. But the thing is that we won't know what will happen until it really happens. But anyway, we can assess, we can calculate. Some things are more probable, some things are less probable. So let's see how it goes. Thank you very, very much for your attention.